Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we are pulling back the curtain on one of the most sophisticated financial warfare operations unfolding in the world right now. We're talking about state-sponsored cryptocurrency theft, sanctions evasion on a scale that would make traditional money launderers blush, and an entirely new geography of digital finance being redrawn across the Asia-Pacific.
I'm Maya Clarity, and Alex, when we say the scale of this is staggering, we are not exaggerating. We're talking about billions of dollars in stolen cryptocurrency, nation-states using hacking crews as revenue generators, and an emerging network of countries quietly building financial infrastructure specifically designed to operate outside the reach of Western sanctions. This isn't some fringe story. This is the future of financial conflict.
And here's what makes tonight's report so critical. The traditional tools that the United States and its allies have relied on for decades to enforce economic pressure, sanctions, trade restrictions, banking controls, those tools are being systematically undermined. Not by criminal gangs operating in the shadows, but by sovereign governments operating in broad daylight, using blockchain technology as their weapon of choice.
We've spent considerable time digging into reporting from the Diplomat, cross-referencing enforcement actions, and tracing the money. What we found is a story that connects North Korean hackers to billion-dollar heists, Chinese exchanges to sanctions circumvention, Russian financial networks to crypto laundering, and a handful of Pacific Island nations being transformed into digital financial havens. This is Statecraft meets fintech, and the implications are enormous.
So buckle in, because tonight on Truth Report, we're following the money, naming the actors, and exposing the architecture of a new shadow financial system that's being built right under the noses of global regulators. Let's get into it.
Alex, let's start with the actor that has turned cryptocurrency theft into what can only be described as a national industry. We're talking about the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, and its state-aligned hacking operations. According to reporting from the Diplomat, enforcement agencies have now publicly attributed large-scale cryptocurrency theft and laundering activity to state-aligned actors in the region, and North Korea sits at the very center of this web.
And Maya, let's put some hard numbers on this because the scale is almost incomprehensible. The Lazarus Group, which cybersecurity researchers and the FBI have directly linked to Pyongyang, pulled off the Bybit exchange hack in February of 2025. The haul? Approximately $1.5 billion in a single operation. Let that sink in. $1.5 billion stolen in one hack. That makes it one of the largest cryptocurrency thefts in history, and it was conducted by operatives working on behalf of a nation-state.
And that wasn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern that stretches back years. The same network has been linked to the Ronin Bridge hack, the Harmony Bridge exploit, and dozens of other operations. According to blockchain analytics firms and U.S. law enforcement, North Korean-linked actors stole over $1.3 billion in cryptocurrency in 2024 alone. When you add 2025's haul, we're looking at a state that has generated multiple billions of dollars through cyber theft in just a 2-year window.
Now here's where the investigative journalism matters, because you have to ask the question that nobody in polite policy circles wants to say out loud. Why is North Korea doing this? The answer is brutally simple. This is how they fund their weapons programs. The United Nations panel of experts on North Korea, before its mandate was effectively vetoed by Russia and China, documented extensively that cryptocurrency theft proceeds were being funneled directly into Pyongyang's nuclear and ballistic missile development programs. We're talking about a country that is literally hacking its way to nuclear capability.
And the sophistication of the laundering operation is what really sets this apart from ordinary cybercrime. According to the Diplomat's analysis, these aren't smash-and-grab operations where stolen funds sit in a wallet waiting to be seized. The Lazarus Group and affiliated units employ multi-layered laundering techniques. They use chain hopping, moving funds across multiple blockchains to obscure the trail. They use mixing services and decentralized protocols to break the link between the theft and the eventual cash-out. And critically, they exploit jurisdictions with weak or non-existent cryptocurrency regulation to convert digital assets into usable currency.
Let's talk about those jurisdictions, because this is where the story gets geopolitically fascinating. The Diplomat's reporting highlights what they call a new crypto geography in the Asia-Pacific, and it's not accidental. Certain countries are actively positioning themselves as hubs for cryptocurrency activity with minimal regulatory oversight, and that creates an environment that state-sponsored launderers can exploit. We're seeing Pacific Island nations, Southeast Asian economies, and Central Asian states emerging as nodes in this network.
And Alex, we need to be precise about what's happening here because there are two distinct phenomena overlapping. On one hand, you have countries that are genuinely trying to attract legitimate fintech investment by creating favorable regulatory environments. On the other hand, you have actors, both state and non-state, who are deliberately exploiting these regulatory gaps for sanctions evasion and money laundering. The problem is that without robust frameworks, those two things become indistinguishable from the outside.
Let's drill into the Chinese dimension of this, because it's enormous and it's uncomfortable for a lot of people in the policy establishment. Despite Beijing's official ban on cryptocurrency trading, Chinese nationals and Chinese-operated exchanges continue to play a massive role in the global crypto ecosystem. According to enforcement actions and blockchain analytics, Chinese over-the-counter trading desks have been identified as key intermediaries in converting stolen cryptocurrency into fiat currency. The Diplomat's reporting documents how these networks facilitate not just North Korean laundering but also sanctions evasion for Russian entities.
And here's the contradiction that should make every regulator's head spin. China officially banned crypto. On paper, there's no legal cryptocurrency trading in mainland China. But in practice, Chinese-linked exchanges operating offshore, OTC desks functioning through encrypted messaging apps, and peer-to-peer networks continue to process enormous volumes. Some estimates suggest that Chinese-linked entities still account for a significant share of global cryptocurrency transaction volume. The ban pushed the activity underground and offshore, but it didn't eliminate it. In some ways, it made it harder to monitor.
Now, the critical question for our audience is whether this is happening despite Beijing's wishes or because of them. And the honest answer is, it's complicated. There's no public evidence that the Chinese Communist Party is directing these OTC desks to launder North Korean crypto. But there is evidence that enforcement against these networks has been selective and inconsistent. When it serves Beijing's interests to crack down, they crack down. When it doesn't, they look the other way. And that selective enforcement is itself a form of statecraft.
Let's pivot to Russia, because the Russian angle on this story has exploded since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Western sanctions on Russia created an immediate and urgent need for Moscow to find alternative financial channels. And according to multiple reports corroborated by the Diplomat's analysis, cryptocurrency has become a key tool in Russia's sanctions evasion toolkit. We're talking about everything from using crypto to pay for dual-use technology imports to converting energy revenue through digital asset channels.
And there's a direct connection between the Russian and North Korean operations that's deeply troubling. After Russia and China effectively killed the UN panel of experts on North Korea by vetoing its mandate renewal, there was no longer an independent international body actively monitoring and reporting on Pyongyang's sanctions evasion. That wasn't an accident. Both Moscow and Beijing had reasons to reduce scrutiny on North Korean financial operations, because those operations increasingly intersect with their own interests.
The Diplomat's reporting highlights something that I think deserves much more attention than it's getting. There is an emerging alignment of interest among sanctioned states and states that resist Western financial hegemony to build alternative financial infrastructure. This isn't a formal alliance. It's more like a convergence of convenience. North Korea needs to steal and launder crypto to fund weapons. Russia needs to evade sanctions to fund its war. China wants to reduce dependence on dollar-denominated systems. And various smaller nations see an opportunity to attract capital by offering regulatory arbitrage. Each actor has different motivations, but the result is the same, a parallel financial system that undermines the enforcement of international sanctions.
Let's talk about the technological dimension, because it matters. The rise of decentralized finance, or DeFi, has fundamentally changed the game for sanctions evasion. In the old world, if you wanted to move illicit money across borders, you needed a bank, and banks could be pressured, regulated, and cut off from the SWIFT network. Decentralized protocols don't have a CEO you can subpoena or a headquarters you can raid. When North Korean hackers move stolen funds through a decentralized exchange, there's no single entity that can freeze the transaction.
And the speed at which these funds can be moved is unprecedented. In the Bybit hack, blockchain analysts observed stolen funds being split into dozens of wallets, bridged across multiple chains, and partially converted within hours. The traditional law enforcement model of freeze, trace, seize was designed for a banking world where transactions took days to settle. In the crypto world, by the time a freeze order is issued, the money has already been fragmented across a dozen blockchains and mixed through privacy protocols.
Now, I want to be fair here because there are people in the cryptocurrency industry working hard on compliance and tracing tools. Firms like Chainalysis, Elliptic, and TRM Labs have developed sophisticated blockchain analytics that can and do trace illicit funds. The FBI and other agencies have had real successes in recovering stolen crypto. But the cat-and-mouse game is accelerating, and the mice, in this case state-sponsored actors with significant technical resources, are getting faster and more creative than the cats.
Let's zoom out to the Pacific Islands dimension, because this is one of the most underreported aspects of this entire story. Several Pacific Island nations have been actively courting cryptocurrency businesses and creating favorable regulatory environments for digital asset companies. Some of this is entirely legitimate economic development. These are small nations looking for revenue sources beyond tourism and fishing rights. But the Diplomat's reporting raises serious concerns about whether adequate safeguards exist to prevent these jurisdictions from being exploited as laundering endpoints.
And there's a geopolitical layer here that connects directly to great power competition. Both China and the United States are competing for influence in the Pacific Islands. When a small Pacific nation creates a crypto-friendly regulatory zone, it becomes a potential node in the alternative financial architecture we've been describing. The question of whether that nation has the capacity, the resources, and the political will to enforce anti-money laundering standards is not just a technical compliance question. It's a strategic question about the integrity of the global financial system.
What struck me in researching this story is how the traditional boundaries between cybercrime, espionage, sanctions evasion, and financial innovation have completely dissolved. 20 years ago, if a country wanted to evade sanctions, it used front companies, shell banks, and physical cash smuggling. Those methods still exist, but they've been supplemented and in some cases supplanted by cryptocurrency operations that are faster, more scalable, and harder to trace. The Lazarus Group doesn't need a network of shell companies in the Caribbean. They need talented hackers and access to decentralized exchanges.
Let me bring up something that should concern every American taxpayer and every citizen of allied nations. The effectiveness of sanctions as a foreign policy tool is being actively degraded. Sanctions have been a cornerstone of Western foreign policy for decades. They're the step between diplomatic protest and military action. If sanctions can be routinely circumvented through cryptocurrency channels, then the entire escalation ladder of international pressure changes. Policymakers lose a critical tool, and the calculus for aggressive behavior by sanctioned states shifts in dangerous directions.
And Alex, the data supports that concern. Despite unprecedented sanctions on Russia following the invasion of Ukraine, the Russian economy has shown more resilience than many analysts predicted. Multiple factors explain that, including energy revenue, trade reorientation toward China and India, and wartime economic management. But cryptocurrency-based sanctions evasion is increasingly recognized as a contributing factor. If you can use crypto to import sanctioned technology components, to convert energy revenue outside Western banking channels, and to access global markets through intermediaries, the bite of sanctions is significantly reduced.
The Diplomat's reporting also raises the issue of what they call regulatory fragmentation, and this is crucial. There is no global standard for cryptocurrency regulation. The European Union has its markets in crypto assets regulation. The United States has a patchwork of federal and state rules. Japan and South Korea have their own frameworks. But many countries have minimal or no regulation at all. And state-sponsored launderers are expert at exploiting the gaps between these regimes. They route funds through the jurisdictions with the weakest oversight, which is exactly what you'd expect rational actors to do.
And the challenge for international coordination is immense. The Financial Action Task Force, FATF, has issued guidance on virtual assets, but compliance is voluntary and uneven. Getting countries to adopt and enforce consistent crypto regulations requires the same kind of multilateral cooperation that is fraying in every other domain of international relations. When Russia can veto UN monitoring of North Korean sanctions evasion, what hope is there for getting universal compliance with cryptocurrency anti-money laundering standards?
Let me highlight a specific mechanism that the Diplomat's reporting touches on, because it illustrates how sophisticated these operations have become. The use of stablecoins, cryptocurrencies pegged to fiat currencies like the US dollar, for sanctions evasion is growing rapidly. Tether, the largest stablecoin by market capitalization, has faced persistent questions about the use of its token for illicit finance. While Tether has a compliance program and has frozen addresses linked to sanctions evasion, the sheer volume of Tether transactions globally makes comprehensive monitoring extraordinarily difficult.
And here's the irony that keeps me up at night. The US dollar's dominance in the crypto world through dollar-pegged stablecoins means that in some sense, American financial infrastructure is being used to undermine American foreign policy. When sanctioned actors transact in dollar-denominated stablecoins, they're accessing dollar liquidity without touching the regulated banking system. The sanctions architecture was designed to control access to dollar liquidity. Stablecoins create a parallel access point that bypasses traditional controls.
Now let's talk about who's losing in this equation, because it's not just an abstract policy problem. When North Korea steals $1.5 billion from a crypto exchange, real people lose money. Bybit's customers, investors, and counterparties bear that loss. When sanctioned states evade financial restrictions, the populations those sanctions are meant to pressure, ordinary Russian citizens, ordinary North Korean citizens, see no change in the policies that prompted sanctions in the first place. The people who are supposed to benefit from sanctions enforcement, the victims of aggressive state behavior, get nothing.
And in the developing world, particularly in Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, the lack of regulatory infrastructure means that ordinary people are exposed to scams, fraud, and market manipulation in crypto markets with little to no consumer protection. The same regulatory voids that attract legitimate innovation also attract predatory actors. It's the most vulnerable populations that pay the highest price for regulatory arbitrage.
So let's bring this all together, because the synthesis of what we've been reporting tonight reveals a pattern that should alarm anyone who cares about global financial stability and international security. What we're witnessing is the emergence of a parallel financial system built on cryptocurrency infrastructure that serves multiple overlapping purposes. For North Korea, it's a revenue generation mechanism for weapons programs. For Russia, it's a sanctions evasion channel. For China, it's a tool for reducing dollar dependence. And for various smaller nations, it's an economic development strategy that carries significant risks.
And the common thread linking all of these actors is the exploitation of decentralization. The very features that make cryptocurrency innovative and attractive, the absence of central control, the borderless nature of transactions, the pseudonymity of participants, those same features make it extraordinarily useful for evading the rules-based financial order. This is not an argument against cryptocurrency technology. It's an argument for recognizing that any tool powerful enough to democratize finance is also powerful enough to undermine the systems that enforce financial accountability.
The policy responses so far have been inadequate, and I'll say that bluntly. The U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control has sanctioned individual wallets and entities, but it's playing whack-a-mole against state-sponsored actors who can generate new wallets at will. International coordination through the FATF is slow and non-binding. And the political dynamics around cryptocurrency regulation in the United States, where the industry has become a significant lobbying force and campaign contributor, make it difficult to pass comprehensive legislation.
According to the reporting we've analyzed, the gap between the speed of technological innovation and the pace of regulatory response is widening, not narrowing. Every month that passes without a coordinated international framework for cryptocurrency regulation is a month in which state-sponsored actors refine their techniques, build new laundering channels, and move billions of dollars outside the reach of sanctions enforcement. This is not a problem that will solve itself.
And there's a deeper structural issue that we need to name directly. The international institutions that were designed to coordinate responses to exactly this kind of challenge are being deliberately weakened by some of the same actors who benefit from the regulatory void. Russia's veto of the UN panel of experts on North Korea wasn't just about protecting Pyongyang. It was about protecting Russia's own ability to operate in the same shadow financial ecosystem. When you destroy the monitoring mechanisms, you create space for everyone to operate with impunity.
What we're describing is essentially a new form of financial warfare, one that doesn't involve bombs or blockades but operates through code, encryption, and the exploitation of jurisdictional gaps. The battlefields are blockchain networks. The weapons are zero-day exploits and social engineering attacks. The supply lines are OTC trading desks and privacy protocols. And the stakes are the same as any other form of warfare: who controls the flow of resources, who can project power, and who gets to set the rules.
Let me leave our audience with a thought about what needs to happen, because at Truth Report we don't just diagnose problems, we push for accountability. First, the United States and its allies need to get serious about closing the regulatory gaps that state-sponsored actors exploit. That means not just sanctioning individual wallets but creating real consequences for exchanges and jurisdictions that facilitate laundering. It means mandatory, not voluntary, compliance with anti-money laundering standards for all cryptocurrency businesses worldwide.
Second, the investment in blockchain analytics and law enforcement capacity needs to increase dramatically. The agencies tracking these funds are doing remarkable work with limited resources. If we can spend billions on traditional financial intelligence, we can invest proportionally in the digital equivalent. Third, and this is the hardest part, there needs to be an honest conversation about the limits of decentralization. The crypto industry has marketed itself as a force for financial freedom, and in many ways it is. But freedom without accountability is just another word for impunity, and right now, the biggest beneficiaries of that impunity are authoritarian states.
And finally, the public needs to pay attention. This isn't just a story about hackers and crypto nerds. This is a story about whether the international community can maintain the tools it uses to constrain aggressive state behavior without resorting to military force. If sanctions don't work because crypto provides an easy bypass, the options for responding to nuclear proliferation, territorial aggression, and human rights abuses get narrower and more dangerous. That's the real stakes of the story we reported tonight.
That's exactly right, Alex. The new crypto geography that the Diplomat describes isn't just a map of where digital assets are traded. It's a map of where power is shifting, where rules are being rewritten, and where the next chapter of great power competition is being fought. And right now, the actors who are willing to break the rules are moving faster than the institutions trying to enforce them.
That's our report for tonight. We've covered the state-sponsored crypto theft operations emanating from North Korea, the laundering network spanning China and Southeast Asia, Russia's cryptocurrency-enabled sanctions evasion, the emerging digital financial havens in the Pacific, and the systematic weakening of international monitoring mechanisms. Every one of these threads connects to a single reality: the global financial order is being challenged not by a rival system but by the deliberate exploitation of a new technology that existing institutions aren't equipped to govern.
If tonight's report made you think differently about cryptocurrency, sanctions, or the future of financial warfare, share it. Talk about it. Demand that your representatives take this seriously. Because the decisions being made right now, in server rooms in Pyongyang, in OTC desks in Southeast Asia, in regulatory offices in Washington and Brussels, those decisions will shape the financial system your children inherit.
For Truth Report, I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Stay informed. Stay critical. And as always, follow the money.
Good night.